All right, man, peace. So for many of you brothers who've been on my channel for a while and who also watch many of my basketball videos, one of the more controversial topics is the list of best players in the NBA today. I always say, or I have always said in the past, that LeBron James is the number one player in the NBA. Certain cats get upset with that. They want me to say Kevin Durant. I've always stated that the reason why I could not put Kevin Durant number one is because he has no leadership abilities whatsoever. He has very poor decorum. He has issues handling his emotions. LeBron James, I don't consider to be a very good leader, but at least he tries to lead. He has that alpha aspect to him. He also happens to have issues with his emotions, but at the end of the day, at least he tries to lead. Kevin Durant has no leadership DNA in him at all. So that's why I can't make him number one, even though I make him number two. At least I did prior to this season, if that makes any sense. As of right now, if someone were to ask me, what are your prognostications for who you believe is going to carry the NBA over the next 10 years? I would say Giannis Antetokounmpo. Once again, as of right now, Giannis is not even in my top 4 when it comes to accomplishments. But when it comes to what I predict for the future of the league and for a certain player, I pick Giannis. Even though he might not be the most skilled when it comes to a diversity of abilities on the court offensively, what he brings to the table when it comes to mental stability, verve, and leadership, to me, far outranks him over players like a Kawhi Leonard or Kevin Durant who have accomplished more for right now. So if someone were to ask me, who is the best player in the league now that LeBron is no longer the best player, I would name Giannis. Now, if Kevin Durant leaves the Golden State Warriors and goes to either the Clippers or the Knicks and becomes a leader and proves me wrong, then naturally I'm either going to have to put him in the throne in that number one spot, or there's going to be a very long-winded debate between Kevin Durant and Giannis, and maybe even a Joel Embiid. Right now, the NBA is in a very good place because they have so many great young players who possibly can take over the mantle for LeBron, because it's very obvious that even though LeBron is still putting up big numbers, what he does is not as impactful in this current NBA. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Let me ask you this, because he's 24 years old, he's young, but he's got that old school mentality. You just heard him. If he's healthy, he's going to play. Rest isn't in his dictionary.
Well, you know, we've heard that from James Harden in the last few seasons, and it has not panned out well for James Harden in the playoffs. He's broken down in the playoffs. When it comes to Giannis, he seems to have better DNA than James Harden when it comes to his overall physical abilities. His body has much more definition. He seems to keep off body fat much easier than James Harden does. And we'll see if Giannis can carry his team this postseason. I'll be rooting for him, but his team does have to at least get to the Eastern Conference Finals for this season to not be an utter disappointment.
Does that make him the best player in the game?
Yes, it does. This is the reason that Shaq said, I'll never let anyone touch that Superman nickname.
Yeah.
This dude, that's Superman.
I agree.
Because he reminds me of a young Jordan that way, too. He takes it hard on every single possession. Actually, I feel like he's more in control than a guy like Westbrook, who obviously goes all out. Like
Westbrook has no control whatsoever. Once again, Russell Westbrook is the action star of the NBA. That's all he is. He's never going to win an Oscar award. He's the action star of the NBA.
Goes at, everyone hates that it's 110%. He really does.
Yeah.
Like he's broken the space-time continuum. But like Jordan, Shaq, they took it hard in an era when Patrick Ewing, because of the knee, was developing that fadeaway jump shot. Shaq, like fadeaway jump shot, I'm taking it hard to go. That's what Giannis does. But it's more than that, Stephen A. He doesn't work out with the opposing players in the offseason. Who's that remind you of? He's not trying to be friends. He even loves Milwaukee. Like, Milwaukee hasn't won a championship since Kareem was in his prime with Oscar Robertson.
Let me say this. I've been critical of Giannis and his approach when it comes to not wanting to work out with other NBA superstars in the offseason. I still believe that he should open himself up to that, especially if he has the opportunity to learn not only what many of these other players do well, but what they do poorly, so that he can use it down the line. But if he wants to stick to this approach, as long as he ends up winning championships, it is what it is. That's fine. I definitely like what I see from him when it comes to his overall player composite. He brings a lot to the table.
And Milwaukee in 1971 was not the right place for Kareem, and he wound up in LA where he belonged, right?
Well, LA was always where he wanted to be. Remember, Kareem went to college in LA. He loved the hippie culture. He loved the weed out there, allegedly. and that's just where he wanted to be. So fortunately for him, he was able to force a trade to LA.
Right, UCLA, and then eventually the Lakers. But Giannis isn't even embracing the town. That mentality.
Giannis is a small town dude. I just hope that he watches that woman that he's with, because that's the only thing that can hurt him right now. He has to be very careful with that.
He has me believing that under pressure, this guy's going to perform. It is a leap of faith. Although we've seen him in the playoffs maybe tick up slightly from the regular season, he is now entering the beginnings of his prime, and I believe he will come through in the playoffs.
I'm not going to lie.
He better come through in the playoffs.
I'm not going to lie to you, Max. Sometimes it's hard for me to even listen to you talk basketball. I'm going to be very, very clear. He's not better than Anthony Davis. He's not better than LeBron James. LeBron James, he's not better than LeBron James.
Stephen A. Smith, you said that sometimes it bothers you to hear Max Kellerman talk about basketball, and then out of your mouth you said that Anthony Davis is better than Giannis Antetokounmpo. If you were to put their stats side by side over the past 5 or 6 years, absolutely, Anthony Davis has much better stats than Giannis Antetokounmpo. But when it comes to leadership and impact, I'm talking about impact with what he brings to the floor, Giannis Antetokounmpo is discernibly a better player than Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis is going to bring you 28 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2.5 blocks and all that other stuff, sure. But does it result in wins? It obviously does not result in wins in his view because he's trying to force a trade. I've said this already. If we were to compare the roster for the New Orleans Pelicans to the roster for the Milwaukee Bucks, they're relatively even. And we see what Giannis is doing with that roster over there in Milwaukee as opposed to what Anthony Davis was able to do with the same roster or an equivalent type of roster talent-wise in New Orleans. And on top of that, once again, he is not a leader. He's a follower who is allowing LeBron James and Rich Paul to change his image and potentially hurt his career.
He's not better than Anthony Davis. He's not better than Kevin Durant. Right now.
Kevin Durant has a more diverse offensive skill set than Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's for sure. But is Kevin Durant the leader that Giannis is?
He will be. I think that somewhere down the line, the Greek Freak will be the best player in the NBA. He ain't yet. I just named 3 players off the top of my head.
Yeah, but you're wrong about all.
I'm not wrong about them at all. I'm not wrong about somebody. Listen, Giannis is the Greek Freak. 57 pounds of muscle since he entered the NBA. The dude is tall. He will yank it on anybody. I get that.
Giannis Antetokounmpo is the Shaquille O'Neal of this era. If we were to transmute Shaquille O'Neal from the 2000s, from the late 90s, early 2000s, to a sped-up era, a more open era, Giannis Antetokounmpo is this era's version of Shaq. That's why Shaq loves how he plays so much.
That's why he shoots 57% from the field. I get because most of them are dunking on people. I get it. Shaq dunked on a lot of people as well. You know what? Shaq was the most dominant. But I'm telling you right now, there was plenty of years as dominant and unstoppable and phenomenal as he was not the best player. The dominance doesn't equal best.
Well, we know that already, Stephen A. Smith. Shaq was drafted in 1992. When he was drafted, Michael Jordan was the best. And then when Michael Jordan left the game, Charles Barkley and Hakeem Olajuwon were battling for who could be considered the best player in the NBA, with Shaq and the burgeoning Orlando Magic trying to see if they could, lay some type of a foothold in the NBA. Then Jordan comes back in the late 90s. He regains his throne as the best player. In the late 90s, going into the early 2000s, there was a battle between Shaq and Tim Duncan. But Shaq was the most dominant player in the NBA for a period of time from about 1998 to about 2003, 2004.
And I'm saying
Did he spend years as the best player in the league, Shaq? You got to stop to think of Shaquille O'Neal in his prime.
Shaq was not the best player in the NBA for 10 years, Max Kellerman. Let me rewind this back a little bit.
Shaq is equal best. And I'm saying
Did he spend years as the best player in the league, Shaq? You got to stop to think of Shaquille O'Neal in his prime.
There was no 10-year stretch where Shaq was the best player in the NBA. Shaq was the best player for about, I would say, 5 years or so. No, maybe 5 years. And even in that time period, Tim Duncan was viewed as being a more skilled player than Shaq.
Shaq and I have talked about this on several occasions. I haven't felt that way. I really, really didn't. Let me tell you something right now. Let me tell you something right now.
Sometimes it's hard for me to hear you talk about basketball.
Because you don't like to learn. You like to think you teach it. There's the difference. But the point that I'm trying to make to you is that your ability to be dominant because you're bigger and stronger than everybody else doesn't mean that your skill set is like.
That's true. But what we also have to factor in is impact. You could be skillful as hell, but if what you're doing is not impacting your team or not impacting your team as much as someone who's more dominant, what do your skills really matter?
Like Kevin Durant, I can't believe you think the Greek Freak is better than Kevin Durant.
But you just reversed
the skills. I said,
but skills are a means to an end. If you can, when you
I'm
say
not getting into that philosophical conversation.
It's not really philosophical. It's pretty pragmatic, as a matter of fact. It's pretty straightforward. What Max Kellerman is trying to say is that the point of talking about how extensive someone's skills are is because you expect the bottom line or the result to be improved by those skills. Well, if someone is less skillful but they're able to get to the same bottom line, then does it really matter that the first person is more skillful? That's really what he's trying to say.
But Stephen, if your team wins and you contributed greatly, even if your skills are not as well-rounded as another player, it means that you're better than them.
Ding.
So in other cases, if that's the case,
or at least more impactful. I wouldn't say better, I'd say more impactful.
Why are we having a conversation when a reigning two-time NBA Finals MVP is Kevin Durant?
Because if you put that player on an unbeatable team already, it changes the equation.
Wait a minute, I got news for you. Kevin Durant without the championship, because Giannis doesn't have a championship yet. Right. Kevin Durant without the championship was religiously averaging 27 a game with more skills for Oklahoma City. I'm saying for Oklahoma City.
That's a better argument, Stephen A. Smith, but I will counter with this. Kevin Durant was also playing with Russell Westbrook, a super talented combo guard. I won't even say point guard, I'll say combo guard. And we know that after a while they did not mesh very well because they were stepping on each other's toes. It's a very difficult argument to make right now because most of the justification for the Greek Freak is based on where he's trending, where he's going. So it's almost like someone who's gotten a stock tip and he's ready to make an investment because he knows where this stock is going to go. That's how the Greek Freak looks right now. He pretty much checks off everything. And I watched him the other night against Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers. That three-point shot from the Freak is coming also. It's coming. Because right now he's taking about 3 or 4 three-point shots a game and he's being totally uncovered. And he's starting to make at least 2, maybe even 3 three-pointers per game. He might take anywhere from 4 to even 7 or 8 in a game depending on how open he is. But he's starting to make 1, 2, 3 of those a game. So if he's able to bring that into his repertoire and expand his offensive game out to that 22-foot range, that's going to open up his driving lanes even more.
So without the championship, so what I'm saying to you is this. We can't just go by that. We have seen evidence. When LeBron James didn't win championships, we saw what LeBron James was saying.
Wait. Kevin Durant won an MVP and was poised to be considered better than LeBron James. Then the playoffs rolled around, and in spite of the fact that he was on a loaded team with Russell Westbrook, with Serge Ibaka,
they lost.
With they lost.
In the Western Conference Finals to a champion at the time, even though they lost after they had that round against them.
Who beat the Western Conference finalists who beat the Thunder? Kevin Durant's team. LeBron James.
Is that what happened, though? I believe Durant won the MVP in 2014, and I think that's the year that Westbrook got hurt and the OKC Thunder lost in the playoffs to Memphis. If I'm wrong about that, one of you brothers please correct me.
LeBron James, and that is how LeBron James maintained his ranking as the best player in the world.
But he was the best before that happened, number one. Number two, when you look at Kevin Durant and what he brings to the table, I'm sorry, when did Giannis get past the first round? When did we see him in the playoffs?
That's the best argument. That's the best argument that you can make against Giannis being considered the best player. But once again, this is more like a stock tip. When I look at Giannis, I see someone who's trending.
No. We're talking at this moment in time.
Not last when he has this moment.
This moment. Right. We have not seen Giannis in the playoffs.
What are we talking about?
What I'm saying to you is this. Kevin Durant is the best. LeBron is better than the Greek Freak. Anthony Davis is not better than the Greek Freak?
Absolutely not. No. Anthony Davis himself knows that he's not better than the Greek Freak. You know why? Because he has no belief in himself as a leader. For Anthony Davis to say, I want to go play with LeBron James, what he's saying is, I don't believe in myself as a leader. So I can't call him better than Giannis. Because Giannis believes in himself as a leader. So hell no.
Anthony Davis.
I love AD.
Really?
Yeah, Greek
Wasn't
freak.
you on the record saying that Anthony Davis would be the best player in the world by
Yes, he was. He was wrong.
I
this
was,
summer?
and the Greek
No, he
Yes.
said Anthony did. Yeah,
Yeah, I said
yes,
AD. Right, and I was proven wrong by the Greek freak.
Okay.
Good for you for acknowledging that, Max Kellerman. I myself also stated that I thought that Anthony Davis was going to go for the MVP this season. He proved me wrong on that because he gave up on himself, he gave up on his team, and he gave up on his season. So it's going to take a lot for me to come to respect Anthony Davis again. But no, I can't put Anthony Davis above the Greek Freak. The Greek Freak this year is trending towards an MVP. When has Anthony Davis ever won an MVP?
Okay. All right.
What? What am I supposed to do? I just saw the guy
Listen,
outplay
this is a
everyone in the
real
league.
good time, fellas, but we gotta go. We gotta talk about all.
But anyway, we'll see how things go for the Greek Freak, a.k.a. Giannis Antetokounmpo, in this year's playoffs. I just don't see anywhere where he has any flaws when it comes to someone that the NBA should be trying to embrace as the torchbearer for the next 10 years. I mean, he pretty much maxes out on everything. So peace.